I want to share today with you some insights into an interesting neshama. I had to see my father-in-law, Shlomi Yechiel HaKoyen Gradzinsky. He was what we don't see it. He was a Polish Hasidic Yid. Now let me explain what that means. He had this individuality. That was the focus. It was the individuality that was the focus of his avodas Hashem. See, because Chassidim in Poland, each Polish chassid was unique, and that was no small thing. The idea was that each person should take his uniqueness and use it in a positive manner. Today that sounds a bit strange, because we're living in a homogenized society where everyone looks the same and we dress the same and everyone is meant to think the same. The problem is that this sameness can stifle one's real avodah in Hashem. So the Mishna is telling us in the second chapter of Avos, which is the proper path a man should choose for himself, whatever is a credit to himself and earns him the esteem of his fellow men. So the Reb Rabbinim of Pshizk, he explains that there are many paths, there are many deruchim, pathways to Hashem. And within the gates of Torah, man can find his unique path that will lead him to his goal of Kedusha. That's what we're here for. We are here. We're all unique. We're all individuals. We all have our own talents. And we're supposed to use what Hashem gave us to find our tikkun, to fulfill why we're here in the first place. So being true to one's path, one can relate and respect others that they are trading their path and they have a different nature. But it's all true. It's all emes. So you could have the Chassidim, you could have Litvisha, you could have Savadim. As long as we're following the Torah, we have to find our own, we have to tread our pathway. And I'll tell you a story. This goes back, right? So probably about 35 years, 40 years maybe, I don't know. Yeah, it was about Bava Rebbe Reb Shlomo. He was a goy, and he was an expert in understanding individuals and giving people the wherewithal to find their path. And so it was, one of my friends, a contemporary in Nebuch Nishtu, he was having problems. He was a Reuven in Houston, Texas, I think it was. And his son was growing up, and his son wanted to be Hasidish, and there was no community there, and the father had to do certain things. He could wear shtreimel, and that to the child was a bit of a problem. So they went and they visited the Bava Rebbe. The Bava Rebbe said to the boy, he says, "Look, each of us have to find our way." And I remember he told me, the Reuven was wearing his big rabbinical hat, and he's telling this boy, it doesn't matter if your derech finds that you don't. So he says, sometimes you can take your hat and you push it down like this, and if that's what Hashem wants, then that's what you do. And the boy was so astounded that Rebbe touched his hat and pushed it down. So all too often we, unfortunately, opt for the simplest route, imitation. I'll just go along and do what the herd does and everyone else does, and that way I won't get into any trouble. But the problem is that one isn't necessarily serving Hashem in this way. He's rather serving his services to the guidelines that others have set. So he may be in style, acting according to the trends of the times, whatever that may be, yet never interacting with his pintala, with that little part within himself that inner being that is his neshama. He's just not going to get there. Now, as I said, the Shver was never satisfied in following the herd. He etched out his own way, and this is a Yid who was on friendly basis. He grew up in the area, in the shtetl, where the Beis Yisrael was a child. They were only separated with 2 years, the Beis Yisrael and the Lev Simcha. So he didn't, and yet he knew this is what you did. You found who you were. He wasn't going to follow any herd. I never remember him without an open sefer. The Yid that he was learning day and night, yet he never pushed his knowledge. He never boasted about anything. He never said how much. You never knew if he finished a Shas or if he finished a Masechta of Mishna. It was all learning all day. It was this soundtrack. This steadily day would tick by the soundtrack of his learning. But let's look a little deeper into this character. Let me show you examples. The Shver would wake up every morning very early, crack of dawn, right? And he wanted to be able to start davening as soon as you're allowed to, you're able to. So the first thing was that he would get up and he would get all dressed and put on get his talis and his tefillin and right, and say his Kriya Shema. And then he had a problem though, because according to the Darker Moshe or Chaim says that you should make your brachas and someone should answer. But everyone was still sleeping, right? So what would he do? He'd tiptoe into the kids' room, or when I had the Shiur to be his guest, he'd tiptoe into my room, right? And he would sit in the chair, and somehow you'd be sleeping and you'd feel something staring at you. And I remember he would take his tzitzis sometimes and, tickle your face. You wake up. Oh, you're up. God, wash Negavasa, hurry up and say Amen to my brachas. Right? So this is what he was. And then this was his beginning of his day. And he would start his day with this kind of stuff. And I remember every morning after davening, he would do a special mitzvah. What was his special mitzvah? He was dressed in his jacket and his gartel, his prayer sash, and he'd wash the dishes and clean the stove and make it, because my mother-in-law was working and he had big Talmid Chacham, a shoichet, it doesn't matter. And he wore a gartel because this was a mitzvah. He refused at the same time to follow any current fashions. When people started wearing wide-brimmed hats, he bought a small-brimmed hat. When everyone decided that we are not going to wear ties anymore, he bought his first one. And yet, Gedoyle HaTorah, Rav Aaron Kotler Zachar Baruch respected him to the point where he was his shoichet, right? And Hasidic Rebbe spoke to him as a dear friend. So he chose the proper path. And that was the proper path that the Mishna is talking about. It gave him the credibility in his own eyes. He knew who he was. And nicht noch gemacht, he didn't copy anybody else. And he had the esteem of fellow men, people who understood Torah, and they looked up to him. So one thing was always paramount. He would never lie to himself. The Kotzker Rebbe Zechar Baruch said that the Kotzker Rebbe said, I would never play the spiel. That means the play acting. He wouldn't play act to be what others perceived he should be. I remember trying to get my father-in-law to wear a long jacket in the weekdays, or a streimel even. Didn't mean anything. But today we live in times when choosing an individual path is probably more important than ever and harder than ever. And we have young people who are wandering and becoming lost in our community. And could this perhaps be because we've locked them out because they can't fit the box that we've created. What about all the thousands of Bala Tshuva? There's holy Nishamalach that dearly speak and seek and soak up the warmth of Torah life. And some of them get caught up with all the do's and the don'ts of the homogenization, and they become discouraged. They can't understand why so many are not involved with actively perfecting their own neshamas, and instead they're fascinated by the do's and don'ts in the state of other people. So the paths that the Mishnah speaks of are unique to each and every one of us. And don't give away. We have the Torah, we have a Masorah, but you have to be true to yourself and know how to fit your Masorah into where we're up to, what we're doing. To be true unto yourself. So the paths that the Mishnah speaks of are unique to each and every one of us. True esteem is earned only when we gain self-esteem. Now, when we float along and doing things on automatic pilot, we can hardly feel any real sense of growth. The Mishnah continues, be as careful with a minor mitzvah as with a major one. So the Baal Shem HaKudosh used to say that the word zahir, which is be careful, has the same root as the word zahar, meaning glowing. When you perform any mitzvah, one should feel the burn, the fire, the glow of doing that mitzvah. One's heart should be fully engaged in a very simple act that you think it may be a mundane little mitzvah, but it's special. I used to watch the Shver's eyes. When he did the most mundane activities, they burned with a fire. Nothing, not his old age, not the tribulations of the war that he went through and the loss of his family, Nebuch, nor any of the ups and downs of his life, that could never extinguish the fire. Preparing the Shabbos candles was an avodah just as vibrant as putting on tefillin for Shachos. A simple act performed with a fiery joy. That's what everything was that way. Is it any wonder that he was a towering character? The characters of all those there was no plastic there. They were original, they were real, they were vibrant. They chiseled out their path in the midst of tremendous adversity. Life wasn't easy, and yet each one fully accepted that his avodas HaKodesh, his service to Hashem, was vital. Those characters, they lived a life that was entirely aware of, as the Mishnah says, the watchful eye and the attentive ear, and all your deeds are recorded in the book, says the Mishnah. If our deeds weren't important, surely they wouldn't be recorded in the book, in Shemayim, in heaven. So we have to realize that our actions have an effect and are important enough to be recorded on high. Every Yid, every Jew is called upon to find his path, a path that disowns self-delusion or play acting. Every mitzvah awaits our fire. The Piasetzner Rebbe Zechon Lebrucher Zeicher Tzadik Lebrucher writes in his own special manner. He says that a person must become an individual in the essence of who he really is. This means bringing forth, taking up, bringing out that which is unique about him and depicts his true self. So we must give our young this awareness so they can find their true selves and become really special. Don't. Now, we're all, as I speak these words, We're in quarantine. Call it what it is. It's now what, 5, 6. You lose track of time. What's the day? Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's all. So we have time to think. We have time to talk to the kids. They're stuck in the house with you. Good. I was saying today to somebody, I said, the sky is Hashem sent for Britain. I'm speaking for Manchester, England. Whoever saw so many days of clear blue skies in Manchester, right? Hashem made this time a time that we're stuck. Look outside, see the blueness of the sky, see the clarity of nature. Share this with your children. Tell them who they are. Say to them, yes, you like to draw. All right, in Cheder they don't draw. Here's the crayons. Learn to draw. One kid likes. I've been watching. They've been sending me pictures of my Einikl. I know that I was so helping. They each one is creating a little classroom of his own. You can't do that in Cheder. So look, no one wants to be in this situation. But where we are, that Hashem put us here. Use it, some kittens. Grow with it. Find yourself. You don't have to copy anyone now. So know what is real. I'm going to end where I started. Just hours before my shver was nifta, he passed away. He had been ill. We were sitting in the hospital in Tzfas, in Eretz Yisrael. In the last few moments, the last hours or so, he had slipped into like a light coma. He would be in and out. It had been 10 days in hospital. We all knew. The whole family was standing there. And those present thought he could no longer respond. The Rebbe said over Shiur, she approached his bedside. She says, Tati, it's time to say Baruch HaShachar. It's the morning. Please, this time you listen and say Amen. And she started to whisper the brachas into his ears. And the shver's eyes were glazed, and I was there. And yet tears of peacefulness came. We all saw it. And from nowhere, with pure Polish chesed willpower, we all heard, every one of us, his so oft, Amen. Again and again after every bracha. Amen. Amen. If you don't mind, you give me a character anytime.